Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a really big change that's going to affect a lot of people from Bangladesh and 37 other countries who are thinking about heading to the United States. So if a trip to the US is on your radar at all, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention. There's a new rule coming down the pike that adds a pretty significant and potentially expensive new step to the visa process for some folks. And it all revolves around this number, $15,000. Now, this isn't a fee you lose forever, but it is a potential refundable bond you might have to pay up front. So what is the deal with this? All right, let's get right into it. The U.S. State Department has rolled out what they're calling a visa bond pilot program. And yep, Bangladesh is now on that list. Okay, the date you absolutely need to circle on your calendar is January 21st, 2026. From that day forward, if you're from Bangladesh, you might, and I stress might, be required to pay this bond to get a temporary visa. And just so you know, Bangladesh isn't the only country on this list. It's actually one of 38 nations in this program. Others include places like Nepal, Nigeria, and Bhutan, though you'll want to check the specific start date for each one. So, how does this whole thing actually work in practice? I mean, what can you expect? It's a process that really kicks off right at your visa interview. Imagine you're in your interview and the consular officer decides you're eligible for a visa. Great. But then they have to make another call. Based on your specific situation, they'll decide if you need to pay a bond, and if so, how much it'll be. It could be $5,000, $10,000, or even $15,000. Now, this is super important. You don't pay anything upfront. The process is really clear. First, the officer decides during your interview. Second, you get official written instructions from them. And only then do you go online to pay. The State Department is very serious when they warn people not to pay anyone before you get those official instructions. Probably the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think of it like a security deposit when you rent an apartment. It's not a fee the government keeps. It's basically a guarantee. A promise in dollars that you're going to stick to the rules of your visa. And of course, that leads us to the biggest question on everyone's mind. How do you make sure you get that money back? Well, the rules for that are very, very specific. Let's break this down. You get a full refund if you leave the US when you're supposed to. Simple enough. You also get it back if, say, you get the visa but your travel plans fall through, or even if you get turned away at the airport. But, and this is a big but, you lose the entire bond if you overstay your visa, or if you try to change your status while you're in the U.S., like applying for asylum. And there is one more critical rule you cannot miss. If you've paid this bond, you must fly into the United States through one of just 3 specific airports: Boston Logan, JFK in New York, or Washington Dulles near D.C. If you try to enter through any other airport, you could be in violation of the terms and risk losing that refund. Okay, so we've covered the what and the how. But why? Why is the U.S. government doing this in the first place? Well, the official reason really comes down to one key idea. And that idea is called a visa overstay. It's the official term for a pretty simple concept. It's when someone comes to the U.S. on a temporary visa, like for tourism or school, and then stays in the country longer than they're legally allowed to. So the whole point of this visa bond, at least according to the U.S. government, is to be a financial deterrent. The thinking is that if you have a huge chunk of your money on the line, you'll have a much bigger incentive to follow the immigration rules and leave on time. The countries chosen for this program are the ones that the State Department says have higher rates of people overstaying their visas. Now, to really get the full picture here, it helps to zoom out and ask, is this kind of financial bond a normal thing for international travel? Is this something other countries are doing? And the short answer is not really. The standard practice almost everywhere else is to ask for proof of funds. You know, they want to see bank statements or pay stubs to prove you can afford your trip. This idea of a mandatory refundable bond is a much more direct and, you could say, aggressive approach. In fact, this isn't exactly a new idea, but it's one that historically hasn't really stuck. New Zealand, for example, tried a similar program to deal with overstays, but ended up scrapping it. And way back in 2013, the UK floated the idea of a bond for travelers from so-called high-risk countries, but canceled the whole thing before it even started. Which brings us right to the heart of the debate. On one hand, US says this is a tool to make sure people follow the rules. But on the other hand, a lot of people see it as a massive financial wall that could block legitimate tourists, students, and families from visiting. So the question we're left with is, will this actually work, or will it just create another huge hurdle for travelers? That's what we'll all be watching. Thanks for sticking with me on this one.